Hello, welcome back to Pages into the Past. Today we're making a Victorian walking skirt with shoulder epaulets. Here's an inspiration picture. The skirt that we're going to make is the Victorian walking skirt. You can see here. I've used this pattern before, very happy with it. It's pretty straightforward. And it turns out beautifully, and we will be going through that. Before you take your length measurements, you will need to pad out your bustle area without a bustle. This here is a 3-way padded bustle. It's got the hips and the bustle area. Over the top, I have thrown just a standard petticoat so that you can see that it now gives a definition in the waist from the back, which is one of the things that we want to see. As you can see, the padding part of it will make it look so that you have the proper silhouette for Edwardian. The skirt's just a little off-center here, but you can see the gist of it, how it gives some of the shape of the Edwardian bum. Say this dress form doesn't like to turn much. So now I've got the petticoat in the right position. I think that I had the opening on the back instead of on the side. And you can see how there's more of a proper silhouette here. And so this is where we're going to take our measurements for the length of our skirt so that we know with the addition of the padding where the extra length might need to be so that you have the length to go all the way down because you've got padding here, padding back here, both hips and a little bit on the rear, so that you get a little bit more on the side here. So that's where we're going to start. And yes, it's very scary to say, oh, pad it out, but as a plus size person, we're already got padding. And everybody's like, but I don't want to add more padding. Well, you have to add padding for the silhouette. It doesn't matter what size you are. You have to add the padding in order to get the round derriere, the round bum of the Edwardian period. And the walking skirt will flow over this, and it'll stick out, and it will create the a little bit more nipped in waist for us big girls. So I'll show you how we're going to progress with that. Now that we have the dress form ready, what we're going to do is take our measurements for the skirt, and we want to take our measurements over the padding to make sure that our pieces are going to be the correct length. So when you know where your waist is, you will want to measure to the floor to where your waist is. So that's what you want your finished length. If you want it a little bit shorter, say that you don't want it to touch the ground and you want it an inch off the ground, you can make those notes onto your pattern. And what I've done here is I've made all my notes. One thing that I did find is that the hip measurement, where you go around the widest part, is about 12 inches larger than my natural size. So there's quite a bit of padding back there, so it should give me quite some good definition. There's a couple gals who made this Victorian walking dress that I like, and it's got almost like a pinafore, shoulder straps, not quite sure what we call it, but I'm going to try to copy that. And it's kind of got a little Swiss waist with shoulder straps. So I'll post a picture of Both of the gals, one is Lauren Marks on her, it's Marks Lauren on Instagram, and then Rebecca Mayton also did one, and I will post a picture of both of their outfits here so that you can see where we're going for. So this walking skirt has a stiffener and lining at the bottom. It comes in 4 different cuttings, and there are a front facing, a side front, a side back, and a back facing that are all cut out of lining and stiffener. And this helps hold the pleats out away from the ankles at the bottom of this skirt. These will not necessarily be cut out of the same fabric. They will probably be cut out of something a little bit lighter because this is wool. And because there's also going to be a stiffener, which is probably going to be just standard interfacing for me, because I'm not doing this at 100% accuracy. I'm doing this because the pictures were beautiful. And I'm going to try to go without having to buy more stuff. So I'm going to go with what I have on hand. Decorations, lining, all that will be what I have on hand. But these are the pieces that are not going to be cut out of the standard fabric. It's a little bit more teal than blue in person versus what I see on my camera for color. I just found that this was a very beautiful color, and I thought I figured I would make that into a beautiful walking skirt, and I bought the whole bolt, so we'll see what else we get to make out of it. One thing that I've done is, because the pattern itself is marked where the facing will go and the inner lining, I decided that since I needed to lengthen this between 2 to 3 inches, I was going to add to the top of the skirt and lengthen it there, so I didn't have to recalculate the difference by lengthening the bottom, because that would have adjusted how wide everything was going to be, and I didn't want to cut this in the middle in order to lengthen it at knee level. The other thing that I've done is I've added pockets. I have just a pattern for pockets that I keep underneath my cutting mat so that I can pull it out, cut my 2 sets of pockets for any skirt that I want, and it's handy so I don't have to go searching for pockets if there's not a pocket in the pattern. The question I'm going to have is where the pockets go between the side back and the side front, if they're going to show because of the hip padding, or do I move it closer to the front, but that's supposed to be more flat. So I'll have to play with where I'm going to put those pockets, because, you know, girls, we all need pockets. So once all the pieces are cut out and the lining, what you're going to do is you are going to sew the lining to each individual piece. And it's called flat lining. So if you come across a term that says flat line, what it is you have both your pieces of fabric, your fashion fabric and your liner, and you sew them together so that each piece becomes an individual piece. And then you will sew all of those seams together in the order that you're supposed to. And so what I've done is, because I know this will frays a little bit, and because I'm flatlining, I went ahead and just did it on my serger. So flatlining is the process of taking these two pieces, the outside and the lining, putting them together and making them one piece before you sew it together as a whole. So now that I've got it all fully flatlined, it says to sew the two front side pieces to the front, which I have done. And then what I did is I lined up the sides, front sides to back sides, so that I could pin where my pockets are going to go. Because it's not part of the pattern, I also left myself a little note that says to add pockets to side and side back, because that's where I've added them before. And what I've done is I've just pinned them to the very top of the pattern piece at the waist. I'm going to sew that on before I sew my side seams, and then sew that with my side seams, sew the pockets into place. If you haven't added pockets before, you do want to come up about an inch from the bottom of where the pocket is, and then you also want to come down about an inch here from the top, just to set those pockets from being too floppy. So I will sew it together up to this point, do a little back stitch, and then I will just do this top part here before I add on the back seam. So there's an update. We'll see how it goes. Alright, so here is the side piece all pinned. I'm going to stitch that all down on both sides, and then we'll be ready to add the back. Alright, so the skirt construction is done. You can see that at the bottom you can still see the serging that I did earlier. So the next step is to sew on the inside facings with a 1/2 inch seam. So the skirt will be approximately 1/2 inch shorter than it is now. The lengthening that I did at the sides is just a hair long, but should be fine once I get the facings in there. You'll be able to see how it just skims the floor. And there is the back view, again, with the padding. And with this, I should be able to maybe possibly do a little bit less padding on the sides and maybe a little bit more at the back. We'll keep playing with that. And then I will give you an update once I get the facing sewn together, and I'll start pinning it on. You're going to pin that right sides together, then flip it to the inside, and then hand stitch it to the lining so that it doesn't show through. So, yay, hand sewing. Yay. Alright, back to work. And now for the belt. So the belt, I'm using a fairly stiff interfacing. It's something I've had in my stash for a really, really long time. So it's a heavyweight sew-in interfacing. So what I've done is I've taken about a 3-inch piece. I've cut it down to 3 inches, and then in the center I have marked it. This was 4 inches, so I did almost 5-inch point. And then I did the curve between 10 inches here. I figured that was a good curve to get some kind of nice angle to a point. And this will be the inside, and then I'm going to cover it with 2 pieces of the wool. And hopefully it will be stiff enough but not too stiff, because it should be able to hold up the edge once you get your double seam in there and top stitch it. It should give it some stiffener so that it doesn't buckle. And then For the shoulder pieces, they will attach to the back side, and I'm kind of calculating on those being finished. The finished width to start with will be 2 inches, up to 5 inches on the shoulder, and then in the back 3 inches, just to help keep it secure to the shoulder. And I'm kind of mimicking the pattern that I can see on the green dress, or the mint dress done by Lauren Marks. So yeah, that's where we're heading. This is the basic shape of the shoulder piece. Now I'm going to add 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around, and I'm going to cut 4 pieces because I'm going to self-line it. And then I'm going to cut out the waist in the same fabric as well, double-sided with 1/2 inch seam allowance around it. And then we shall stitch it together and see how it looks. So right now I've got it pinned in place. You can see here how I've got the belt and the straps. Just kind of eyeballed it for right now. We don't have the right blouse underneath of it, but I'm going to put strips across the front here to help keep it on the shoulders so that it doesn't slide off. And then the belt will fasten in the back. It's a little sloppy right now, but you can see the back. I'll get those stitched down to the belt and get the belt fastened. Before I do that, I have to figure out what I'm going to do trim-wise, because I want to put the trim on before I sew the straps to the belt. So now I just have to decide fabric or lace. That will be the step. I'm going to put the hem on the bottom first. That'll be my next step, and then I'll be debating about my trims. I'll let you know what I decide. And here I'm pinning the trim that I'm deciding upon to see whether I like 1 or 2. Progress update. I laid white on, and I wasn't quite happy with white. It didn't really mix with the teal. I know it looks blue in pictures, but it does have more green in it than it's showing. And so I decided to go with black. So now we'll be putting trim at the bottom to tie it in with the upper part. And I'll show you that when I get it all done. Here I am sewing the trim to the bottom of the skirt, and here's the final product. I did not film this, but I put it on, and here's pictures of me wearing it. My husband was taking these pictures, and so they are a little darker than I would have liked, but I'm very happy with how it turned out. This is the aftermath of when you get to take it all off, and I just piled it all on a desk. And then I made a hat. This is how I stitched on the rim. It was an existing hat, covered up the metal around the edge, and then I decorated it. Remember how I said I wasn't going to buy anything? Well, I did have to buy some black trim. So, thank you for viewing. Make sure you subscribe. Keep on sewing.